The Rock and the Foundation, a linguistic and philosophical analysis of Matthew 16:18. Introduction. Matthew 16:18 records one of the most debated passages in Christian theology. You are Petros, and upon this petra I will build my church. The distinction between Petros, and petra, has fueled interpretations regarding Peter's role in the church, as well as broader theological debates about authority, faith, and Christ himself as the cornerstone. While Christian scholars have long analyzed the implications of this wording, the linguistic contrast finds compelling parallels in classical Greek literature and philosophy, where the distinction between a movable stone, Petros, and an immovable rock foundation, petra, is used metaphorically to differentiate transient elements from enduring truths. By exploring the grammatical, theological, and literary ramifications of this distinction, we uncover a deeper understanding of how Christ's statement aligns with Greek thought and its philosophical conceptions of permanence and stability. The linguistic distinction in Matthew 16:18. At first glance, the differentiation between Petros and petra may seem minor, but it carries significant weight in biblical exegesis. Grammatical considerations. Petros is a proper noun, a masculine form, and serves as the Greek rendering of Peter's name. Petra is a common noun, feminine in form, and refers to a bedrock, foundation, or large, immovable rock. The gender difference suggests an intentional contrast, as one would typically expect consistency in gender when referring to the same object. Theological ramifications. The Catholic tradition largely interprets Petros as referring to Peter himself, arguing that Christ establishes Peter as the foundational figure of the Church. Protestant perspectives often emphasize the distinction, suggesting that petra refers not to Peter, but to something broader, either Peter's confession of faith or Christ himself as the immovable foundation of the Church. Early Church Fathers, such as Augustine, sometimes interpreted petra as Christ, reinforcing a theological tradition where the Church is built upon Christ rather than any individual disciple. This linguistic difference complicates the passage's interpretation, requiring us to examine whether this contrast is purely incidental or rooted in broader Greek thought. Greek literary and philosophical parallels. In classical Greek literature, the distinction between a small stone, Petros, and a bedrock, petra, carries deeper metaphorical significance. Homeric usage of petra and Petros. In the Odyssey, Homer uses petra to describe large, immovable cliffs and foundational rock formations, emphasizing stability and permanence. Petros, however, appears in contexts where stones are moved, thrown, or used as weapons, highlighting their transient and manipulable nature. Sophoclean and Euripidean imagery. Greek tragedians often use petra metaphorically to symbolize unchangeable truths or unalterable fate, suggesting a force beyond human influence. Petros, in contrast, appears in narratives where characters face change, decision-making, or uncertainty, reinforcing its connection to something movable rather than foundational. Greek philosophy, foundation versus transience. In Platonic thought, immutable truths, petra, contrast with shifting perceptions or imperfect representations, Petros. Aristotle's concept of substance versus accident finds a parallel in this distinction. Substance, petra, is enduring, while accident, Petros, refers to changeable qualities. These Greek literary and philosophical applications align with the theological debate surrounding Matthew 16:18. When Christ declares, "Upon this petra I will build my church," he may be invoking a well-established Greek conceptual distinction, separating Peter, Petros, as a disciple from the greater foundational bedrock, petra, upon which the church rests. Synthesis, the intersection of theology and classical Greek thought. By merging the theological interpretations of Matthew 16:18 with classical Greek literary and philosophical traditions, we can refine our understanding of Christ's words. Peter as representative versus faith as foundation. The use of Petros suggests that Peter plays a significant role, yet the shift to petra implies that the actual foundation of the church is larger than one person. This aligns with Greek thought, where an individual, Petros, may move and change, while truth, petra, remains unshaken. Christ as the bedrock. Some interpretations suggest that Christ himself is the true petra, reflecting the Homeric and Sophoclean imagery of an unchanging and eternal foundation. The Greek conceptual framework strengthens this interpretation, given that petra consistently represents enduring principles in literature and philosophy. Faith as the foundational truth. If petra refers not to Peter but to his confession of faith, then Christ is reinforcing a distinction present in Greek philosophy, faith as an unshakable foundation rather than any single person as the basis for the church. By understanding the Petros-petra distinction, not only in theological terms, but also in relation to Greek linguistic structures, we appreciate Christ's choice of words as a deliberate invocation of foundational truth and transient action. Conclusion. Matthew 16:18 presents more than a simple name change. It encapsulates a deeper linguistic and philosophical contrast that resonates beyond Christian theology into Greek literary and philosophical traditions. The distinction between Petros and petra mirrors established Greek narratives about stability versus movement, truth versus transience, and permanence versus human limitation. Whether one sees petra as Christ himself, Peter's confession of faith, or the Church's doctrinal foundation, the Greek usage reinforces the idea that Christ's Church was meant to rest upon something far more enduring than a single disciple. By integrating theological analysis with classical Greek literary parallels, we illuminate a passage that speaks not only to Christian doctrine, but also to the broader intellectual traditions of the ancient world.